but first guest of this whole spring and summer session. We'd like to kindly introduce His Grace Devakinandan Prabhu, who's actually here for a second time. So maybe first of all we can introduce and welcome Prabhu. So just a small introduction that probably does not do justice for all the wonderful services Devakinandan Prabhu does, but Devakinandan Prabhu is a senior disciple of Mahavishnu Swami and hails from Singapore, and it serves there as one of their many congregational leaders. And he actually joined Krishna consciousness in the late 1980s and has been serving across the globe spreading Krishna consciousness. So again, we'd like to thank again Devakinandan Prabhu, and without further ado, I'll give it to you.
Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Girivara Dhari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhavi. Jai Shri Shri Radha Kishore Gopinath Ji ki. Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Mai ki. Jai Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki. Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we welcome all devotees today to the temple, and we thank you very much for joining us. In Sastras it is stated that whenever we have an opportunity to come together to hear about Krishna, that opportunity is not accident. That opportunity is arrangement. We should always be clear that while we may have the desire to come to the temple, it is only with Krishna's blessings that we are able to be seated here. Krishna is the prime selector, and if it is merciful, and if he is willing, and if he is happy, and by his sanction, we are all able to be gathered to hear about it. Therefore, we should never take these opportunities together for granted. It's a very important part of devotional service. While we have our minds and we have our hearts and we have our desires, it is Krishna finally who fulfills them. So therefore, we are very fortunate that out of so many people in this world or in this part of the world, we are given a chance today to hear about Krishna. So we try to read something from Bhagavat Gita, chapter 2, text 27. I'll just chant the verse and maybe you can repeat it. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityu. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityu. Dhruvam janma mritasya cha. Dhruvam janma mritasya cha. Tasmat apariharye rite. Tasmat apariharye rite. Natvam sochitam arhasi. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityu. Dhruvam janma mritasya cha. Tasmat apariharye rite. Natvam sochitam arhasi. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityu. Dhruvam janma mritasya cha. Tasmat apariharye rite. Natvam sochitam arhasi. Please repeat the synonyms. Jatasya, of one who has taken his birth. He, certainly. Dhruvaha, a fact. Mrityuhu, death. Dhruvam, it is also a fact. Janma, birth. Mritasya, of the dead. Cha, also. Tasman, therefore. Apariharye, of that which is unavoidable. Arte, in the matter. Na, do not. Tvam, you. Sochitam, to lament. Arhasi, deserve. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Please repeat the translation. One who has taken his birth is sure to die. And after death, one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. Please hear the purport. One has to take birth according to one's activities of life. And after finishing one term of activities, one has to die to take birth for the next. In this way, one is going through one cycle of birth and death after another, without liberation. This cycle of birth and death does not, however, support unnecessary murder, slaughter, and war. But at the same time, violence and war are inevitable factors in human society for keeping law and order. The battle of Kurukshetra, being the will of the Supreme, was an inevitable event, and to fight for the right cause is the duty of a Kshatriya. Why should he be afraid of or aggrieved at the death of his relatives, since he was discharging his proper duty? He did not deserve to break the law, thereby becoming subjected to the reactions of sinful acts, of which he was so afraid. By avoiding the discharge of his proper duty, he would not be able to stop the death of his relatives, and he would be degraded due to his selection of the wrong path of action. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padha Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakavanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriya Namo Mahabharanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Dhaure Tushe Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This is a very, very beautiful verse from Bhagavad Gita. It has two important points that we can look and think about. The first thing Krishna says in this verse is that one who has taken his birth is sure to die. And this is something that we all understand. But when it comes to the time for us to leave, it is a very difficult thing to experience. The beauty of this point of everyone having to face death is very nicely illustrated in Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, Yudhishthira Maharaj is asked this very famous question: what is the most wonderful thing in the world? And Yudhishthira Maharaj replies very nicely: the most wonderful thing in the world is that every day someone is dying. But those who are alive think that they will live forever. If you think about it, that is truly the most wonderful thing in the world. Because it's the most amazing thing. Every day, someone whom we know or we don't know is going to die. And yet when we see them dying, we may feel some sympathy. Sometimes if we know them, we feel sadness. Sometimes we may just accept it. But in that acceptance, we may forget that our turn is going to come. Yet, we live as if we will live forever. And we always think the next person will probably be the one next to me. But it may not be me. And in that way, we forget that death is very close. So for one who is born, Krishna says death is certain. And for one who is not in the company or devotional service of the lotus feet of the Lord, then the problem with death is, just as we die once, we will take birth again. And after taking birth again, we must face death again. And therefore this cycle of birth and death continues and continues and continues. And in between birth and death, we have to face two other stations of life. And that is old age. And if some of us don't end up being old, well, at least we will definitely fall sick. So there is no one here who can claim not to be born, otherwise you will not be present before me. And for everyone who's here, no one can claim that they will not die. That time is coming. So the question that really we must understand is that we cannot live forever. And that is what Arjuna was being told by Krishna. That everyone on the battlefield is also going to die. But now the question is, what is your role in this battle? The battlefield of Kurukshetra was not just a simple battlefield. Arjuna thought that he was going to be responsible for the killing and the destruction or for the battle. But in 1133 of Bhagavat Gita, Krishna makes it very clear to Arjuna, Mayai vaite nihata purva eva nimitta matra bhavya savya sachi. He says very nicely that, my dear Arjuna, you must get up, you must fight, for it is your duty. It is your job description. You can't run away from it. But he says, I have news for you. Even though you are the greatest warrior on this battlefield, and even though you are known as Savyasachi, Savyasachi means one who shoots the arrows very expertly. But I've got news for you, Krishna says. Krishna says, by my arrangement, by my arrangement, whoever who is supposed to be killed on the battlefield, he is going to die. And whoever will survive on the battlefield, he will not die. So that's news to Arjuna in the 11th chapter. And that is also news to us. Because very often, we live in this world thinking that we have control over what we are doing. But as we grow older, we find that our control over what we think is part of our life is actually very little. There are many things that are beyond our control. Krishna confirms in the battlefield of Kurukshetra that whoever was going to die or whoever was going to live, they would live or die according to the arrangement of the Lord, according to His plan. Therefore, what would be the role of Arjuna? And what would be our role if Krishna has full control? What is our role then? Krishna says very nicely in the last line of 1133, Nimitta matra bhavya savyasachi, that you just become an instrument in my hands. And whatever that pleases me, you perform that activity. So our life becomes very clear when we live according to this point in Bhagavad Gita. If a devotee understands that he is an instrument in the hands of the Lord, then half the battle of thinking of what to do and when to do, and of thinking that, oh, this is my burden, it completely goes. That is why, at the point in Mahabharata, when Bhishma Dev took a vow that the next day he would kill all the Pandavas, including Arjuna. Arjuna that night went to sleep very well. It is said in Mahabharata that Krishna could not sleep that night. Krishna was walking up and down in his tent, and he was thinking, Bhishma Dev is very powerful. If he has taken such a powerful vow, I think if he's taken such a powerful vow, then I think Arjuna will be in trouble tomorrow. Krishna is very kind. So he was thinking, if I can't sleep tonight, how much more Arjuna can't sleep tonight? After all, the vow was on his head, not mine. So maybe I will go and see him in his tent, and maybe I will pacify him. So Krishna is very kind, and he goes over to the tent, and to his surprise, Krishna is snoring very loudly. He's having a good sleep. So Krishna goes up to Arjuna. Arjuna was sleeping very well. So Krishna goes up to Arjuna and says, Arjuna, how can you sleep? How is it that you're sleeping so well? And Arjuna is still in his sleep. He says, I'm sleeping well because I have you. I know that if Bhishma Dev took a vow, well, it's on your head to protect me. It's not on my head. He took the vow, but you give the protection. And that is why I'm very peaceful. Today in the morning we read in Bhagavatam how Amrish Maharaj was about to be cursed by Durvasa Muni, because Durvasa Muni was very angry with him. And he sent a powerful demonic creature to come and devour Amrish Maharaj. But Bhagavatam tells us when Amrish Maharaj saw this powerful creature coming before him, he was not at all disturbed. And the reason he was not disturbed was, he saw that difficult situation as the hand of Krishna. When Parikshit Maharaj was cursed by the powerful curse of the Brahmana Shringi, Parikshit Maharaj accepted the curse of the Brahmana as the form of the Lord's mercy. He says, my dear Lord, you have graciously overtaken me in the form of a Brahmana's curse, because you knew that I have become too attached to family, friends and society, and therefore I will never leave them to come to your lotus feet. And therefore, by your mercy, you have instilled fear in my heart, so that I am forced to turn to you, and I am forced to hear Bhagavatam. So for a devotee, any awkward situation in our lives, we take that as an opportunity to increase the intensity of our devotional service. Because we believe that we are instruments in the hands of the Lord. The beauty of an instrument, like a surgical knife, is that if supposing the surgeon uses the knife to perform an operation, and for some reason the operation is all botched up and the patient dies, nobody sues the surgical knife, isn't it? Nobody blames the knife. They always blame the surgeon. So the knife is free. If you become an instrument in the hands of the Lord, Krishna is so kind that you are actually factually free. You just have to execute His order. And whatever that comes on the execution of His order is His blessings. That is why in the 5th chapter, 10th verse of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives us the secret of how to work for Him. And that's the same secret He tells in 2:27 to Arjuna. He says, Brahmani adhaya karmani sangam tyatva karoti yaha. So he says that all we have to do when we start any activity is to remember that that activity is done for the pleasure of Krishna. That is the first thing we should be clear about. It can be any activity, but if that activity is within our scope of duties, then we should be clear why we do it. So Krishna says that once we are clear who we are doing it for, then every time we perform an activity, we do this particular notion. In Sanskrit it is known as adhaya. And if you read Bhagavad Gita, adhaya is translated by Srila Prabhupada as resigning. So basically, every time we perform an activity, after the activity is performed, we resign from the results of the activities. So it's like if you go to work in the morning, you sign an employment contract. At the end of the day, at 5 or 6, when you finish your work, you then offer your resignation. And the moment you resign on that day, whatever results that come, you leave it at the lotus feet of Krishna. And if you do it, Bhagavad Gita says, then what happens is, you will not be touched by any sinful actions. And you become just like Padma Patram Imam Pasama. Padma means lotus. And Krishna gives the example of how a lotus flower grows in the muddy swamps and the mangroves. The lotus flower is a beautiful flower, but where it grows is not very beautiful. But it doesn't touch the beauty of the flower. In the same way, we may have so many duties in this material world which may not be very nice, which sometimes we have to do because we are part of the system of this world. But as long as we remember that whatever activities that come from the duty and the results that accrue from there has to be offered to Krishna, then that point when we resign, we become nimitta matra, we become instruments in the hand of the Lord. If we can capture this essence, then in any activity that we do for Krishna, we will always be peaceful. When Arjuna was giving all the favorable arguments why he should not fight, he was actually becoming more and more confused. Instead of becoming more and more happy, he was becoming more confused. And ultimately, in the 2nd chapter, 7th verse, he finally puts both his hands up and he says, "My dear Krishna, now I have lost my composure. Now I have lost my confidence. Now I have lost all ability to understand what I should do. And now I am a soul who is surrendered to you." That is the point when Arjuna becomes a devotee of the Lord. Till then, he is a friend. But when he surrenders to Krishna, because he has lost composure and confidence, and because he is confused, all three C's, he has lost composure, he's lost confidence, and he's confused. And we are always faced with loss of composure, we are always faced with a test of confidence, and daily we are always confused. This is the nature of the material world. It is the nature of the material world to bewilder us. Therefore, a devotee of the Lord does not dwell on the difficulties of the material world. He uses the difficulties of the material world to increase his remembrance of Krishna. That is why it is stated here, for a devotee, forgetfulness of Krishna is as good as being dead. To die is not so bad for a devotee. Because if a devotee remembers Krishna and he leaves this world, he does not come back again. But if he doesn't remember Krishna, then Sastras tell us, whatever desires he has in his heart, which has nothing to do with Krishna, those desires are already creating a material body for him in his next life. It's as simple as that, and it's very frightening. So every time you walk on the streets and you see a beautiful car that you don't have, and the moment you desire, I like this car. But supposing you don't get this car in this life, don't worry. Krishna has already reserved one material body for you in the next life, and definitely that car is also reserved for you. But by the time you get that car, there's something else which is better than that car. So when the car comes, you're not so excited. And immediately you look at the next car that passes by, and you say, you know what, I think this one's better. And Krishna says, fine, let's have a body ready for you, so you can enjoy that car also. In the same way, everything that we see in this world, the moment our mind and our hearts fix ourselves on it and say, hey, this is nice, that moment a body is made ready. In 554 Srimad Bhagavatam, this point is given as Sastra. Nunam pramattam kurute vikarma yat indriya pritaya aprikrati na sadhu manye yata atmanoyam asannapi kleshada ashadeha. So Rishabdev instructs his sons, and it's a very good instruction for us. He says, my dear sons, when a person considers sense gratification to be the aim of life, he actually becomes mad after materialistic life. And then he engages in all kinds of sinful activities because he forgets that the source of all that is coming to him is actually the mercy of the Lord. And when that happens, he does not realize that this body that he has received is due to previous desires. And therefore, because of future desires, he will get another body to suffer in this world of birth, death, old age and disease. If you think being born is very nice, and for all of you who have witnessed births of babies, you'll find that the baby comes out never smiling. Have you seen a baby coming out smiling in this world? I haven't seen one, never heard of one. All the degrees that you get in this material world, the MBAs, the degrees of all the hard work that you have put, it never comes with you when you come in your next life. No baby is ever born with a certificate ready in hand. Never. And when the baby is born and it is silent, then all the doctors and the parents, they become worried. Why is this child so silent? The doctors normally tend to turn the babies around and give them a nice pat on the back. Tends to be a slap more than a pat. And when the baby starts crying, we all start laughing. Because we think, yes, child is alive. And for those who are born, death is also not easy. You have seen or you have heard how difficult it is to leave this body. And you know how difficult it is to be sick. And in between all that, we all know how difficult it is to become old. The day you start seeing grey hair on your hair, or no hair on your head, that day you start becoming depressed. Then you look back at all the time when you thought you were young, and you think now that time is over. So therefore, there is no joy really in birth, death, old age and disease. So Rishabdev is right. He says that a sane gentleman never prays to come back to this material world. A sane gentleman comes to understand that the only way for us to become peaceful is to become connected to Krishna. And how can we become connected to Krishna? There is only one way. The best way to become connected to Krishna is to chant, to hear, and to always remember his transcendental activities. Kunti Mata says in 1.836 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Shrunavanti Gayanti Grananti Avikshnashaha Smaranti Nandanti Tavehitam Janaha Taeva Pashyanti Achirena Tavakam Bhava Prabhaho Paramam Padambhujam. So the secret of coming out of this inevitable cycle of birth and death is given by Kunti Mata. She says, those who continuously hear, chant, and recite the transcendental activities of the Lord, or if you can't recite, if you can't chant, or if you can't remember the activities of the Lord, at least they take pleasure in hearing from others about the transcendental activities of the Lord. These persons who do that, what happens to them? They can see the lotus feet of the Lord in their hearts. That is the guarantee of Kunti Mata to all of us. If you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare, then it is definite that we become immediately connected to Krishna. If you chant Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola for the next 15 minutes, try it. We don't recommend it, but try it if you want to, if you don't believe us. You'll find that after chanting 15 minutes of Coca-Cola, two things will happen. One, your thirst will not be quenched, despite the fact that you're chanting Coca-Cola. Two, Coca-Cola doesn't miraculously appear before you. If it did, then Coca-Cola would be out of business. But if you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, you'll find you can keep chanting it and you will not get bored with it. It's amazing. It's true. And because you chant Krishna's names, Krishna immediately appears in your heart. And in front of you, he appears in the form of his beautiful deities. And in front of us, he appears in the association of devotees. So it's up to us really, Prabhus, Matajis. Are we going to decide whether we are going to dedicate our life and activities towards Krishna and become instruments? Or we decide that we will actually try to control our lives, of which we practically have not much control over, and then we will become subject to the laws of birth and death. Yamaraj is the person we will meet at the end of our lives if we do not remember Krishna. That appointment with Yamaraj is an appointment we would rather not keep. Yamaraj is very attracted to those who cannot remember at the end of who cannot remember Krishna at the end of their lives. And for those who are born, Yamaraj is very certain. There was this bird, that was sitting on a tree. And one day when it looked down, it saw Yamaraj smiling at it. Normally when someone smiles at us, we are quite happy, isn't it? See, the audience is smiling at me, so I don't mind speaking to you. If you all looked at me very strictly, I won't come back to Toronto. So smiling is always nice, but when Yamaraj is smiling at you, that's not very nice. So the bird got very scared. Why is the Lord of Death looking at me at this time in the morning? It means I must be dying soon. So he prays very hard to Garuda, his cousin. Garuda comes and says, "My dear cousin, what is it that you need?" He says, "Look over there. Yamaraj is smiling at me. I don't think that's very good. Please take me very far, far away from Yamaraj." So Garuda says, "No problems. My wings are transcendental. Let me bring you to the end of this entire known universe. And Yamaraj will never be able to catch up with us." So Garuda puts the little bird on the back and he flies very far to the end of this known universe. And there is a tree. And he puts the little bird perched on the tree. The moment the bird sits on the branch of the tree, it falls dead. And there, before him, Yamaraj is smiling. So now Garuda is very upset with Yamaraj. He says, "Yamaraj, what is this? I flew so far to save the bird, and you are smiling at me." And Yamaraj says, "You want to know why I'm smiling? I'm smiling because in the morning when I looked up all the list of my cases, I realized that this bird is going to be a difficult case because his death was going to be at the end of the known universe, which is too far for him to possibly go on his own." And I was thinking, how is this going to be? Maybe I've got the list not so right. But then you turned up, my dear friend, and you took him all the way there. And now I'm smiling because I realize that when the plan of the Lord comes before us, we cannot move away from His plan. We just have to flow with it. One last pastime of Yamaraj I can remember. This is a famous story in Dwarka Dham. There was a very famous sculptor who used to make beautiful images very nicely. And he possessed a strong false ego, thinking that he was the proprietor of his talent. One day an astrologer told him that at this particular time you are going to die. So he thought, I must avoid this appointment with Yamaraj. So he hit upon a brilliant idea. He made 4 real life statues of himself, the likeness of which no one had ever seen. And at the appointed hour when he thought he would die, he stood as still as the statues. Yamaraj walks into the house because it's time for him to take his next guest. He walks in and he sees 4 wonderful looking men. He looks at his list and he says, "Wait a minute. According to today's list, there's just one person in this address for me to take. So who's the person?" So he looks and he can't tell who is the actual person for him to take. So then Yamaraj smiles to himself and says, very loudly, "Who is this sculptor who has made these statues? His workmanship is very bad. It's not up to the quality. I travel all over the 3 worlds, and this is about the worst quality I've ever seen." Immediately the sculptor jumps out of his pose, and he says, "What do you mean, Yamaraj? You have no experience in these matters. How can you comment on my work?" Yamaraj says, "Thank you very much." So we must understand one thing that Bhagavad Gita makes it clear. The plan of the Lord is absolute. Death is going to come. But those who are with Krishna, Yamaraj becomes our friend. Do you know when Parikshit Maharaj sat down to hear Bhagavatam with all the sages in Naimisharanya, they sat down for 1,000 years to hear Bhagavatam. The reason they could sit down and no death came to them, because guess who was in the audience? Yamaraj himself. And he wasn't wearing the hat of the superintendent of death. He was wearing the hat of a devotee hearing Bhagavatam. So the simple point is, if we want to be free of this cycle of birth and death, be with Bhagavatam, be with Bhagavad Gita, take shelter of Srila Prabhupada. And if you do that, then Yamaraj becomes our friend. Our time will come, but when that time comes, our appointment will be with Krishna. It will not be with Yamaraj. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananda Gauri Vaishnavinda ki, Jai Gaura Premanande. Hare Krishna.
Before we take prasadam, do you not agree that was an incredible class? Was that not something else? It's great Devakinandan Prabhu had us hanging on his every word, am I right? And I think the devotees of Toronto would love to see Prabhu come more often. And we were ecstatically wonderful. Thank you so much for a wonderful class. One more time, please. Devakinandan Prabhu. It's only once a year that we get to do prasadam, hopefully more. So I would encourage devotees during prasadam time, if you see Prabhu, please come on forward and welcome him back to Toronto, and please join the chorus of voices as we welcome Prabhu to come more often to Toronto, as we would welcome that opportunity to host you more often. So thank you again. We will serve our vegetarian feast for prasadam. Now, before we do that, we mentioned during the announcements today that at the end of prasadam time, the feast, at around 7:50, we're going to actually close the line. We've had
Krishna